year. We won't sugarcoat it. This session is going to be challenging. We are going to see bills that attack civil rights and civil liberties coming from all angles. And while we will give all our effort to defeat them, there are no guarantees. But we are not without hope. As a nonpartisan organization, we are working with folks from all backgrounds and lived experiences to push some exciting legislation forward that we get to talk about with you this evening. We're working with legislators from both sides of the aisle to support our priorities and goals. We're focusing on educating the public about these priorities, sharing evidence-based research and data to strengthen our proposed policies, and humanizing the people impacted by the policies by putting faces to the issues for which we fight. So tonight we'll give you a very brief overview of how the legislative session works, who on our team will be doing what, and how we've structured our priorities. We will share some anticipated outcomes for our priorities, key legislators that can move each bill forward, and how you can play a part throughout the session. So just some logistics. To be respectful of everyone's time and presence here, we would appreciate it if you could keep yourselves on mute and use the raise hand function or the chat to ask questions during the designated question and answer portion of the evening. We'll call on you to unmute or to ask your questions in real time during the Q&A. We'll do our best to get to everyone. We also wanted to make sure that you understand and are aware that this meeting is being recorded so we can share this with folks who aren't able to be with us tonight. Finally, thank you. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us this evening and being engaged in this incredibly important work. This work is only possible through your partnership and support. And when we're looking at this particularly tough session ahead of us, we need every one of you with us. So I will now pass this over to Ashna Khanna, our policy director. Ashna, take it away.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Mary, and welcome everyone. Thank you again for being here and good evening. Happy Wednesday. My name is Ashna Khanna and I'm the policy director here, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the 2023 legislative session. We'll give you an overview of who our team is, what the political landscape looks like, some opportunities, and then dive deeper into some of our legislative priorities. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat throughout, and we will address them either throughout or at the end. All right, so what does our political landscape looks like? I like to spend a minute to kind of describe the environment we're in, because I think that's very important when we're thinking about making systematic change and ensuring that communities most impacted are centered around the policies we are trying to pass. And so what we're dealing with is we have a split legislature. We have a GOP majority House and a Democratic controlled Senate. We also have a Republican governor who has been attacking civil liberties and rights in an unprecedented way. And so another thing to note that's very important is next fall, we have a very important election here in Virginia. The entire Senate and House is up for election. So this next legislative session, we are going to see a lot of policies being proposed, a lot of folks who are going to be talking about the Virginia that they want to see. And we think our role as the ACLU working with community is really, again, to educate and do a lot of public education around the facts, to separate those from the myths and make sure that we center the policies around the communities. We have a lot of opportunities, and so we will work to pass proactive legislative reforms where possible in a bipartisan manner. We will inform and educate the public through stories and data, framework and messaging on issues that are really important. And we will work to defend civil liberties and defeat all bills that impact will be detrimental for communities and a step backwards for Virginia. And so I just want to, take a moment to really highlight that we are thinking about building power and building change throughout Virginia. We work with a lot of community partners, untraditional partners, and people that come from a variety of experiences and backgrounds. And so we really appreciate when folks are really engaged with us. Just to note a couple of things, we had over 70,000 community members comment opposing the model policies for transgender and non-binary students that was proposed by the Virginia Department of Education. These policies are contrary to state law, and their adoption will result in violations of the rights of students, parents, school, and will inflict serious harm on transgender and non-binary students. And to see everyone stand up and tell VDOE that we do not want to see these policies and that all students should be safe and welcome and included was really amazing to see. I also want to recognize, and we'll get this into it later, like seeing Roe v. Wade overturned this summer was devastating. And now, we face a new reality where bodily autonomy and freedom to make medical decisions are not legally protected under federal law. Make no mistake, abortion is still legal in Virginia, but this legal protection is in jeopardy. And so we'll talk about all the work we will do this upcoming session to really make sure that continues to be true. And really my message is that we're not giving up, we're just getting started. So we recognize that there's going to be barriers, but we're so grateful to be in community with all of you to work towards these opportunities and make sure that we strive to have a Commonwealth where civil liberties are protected and expanded. How do we do this work? So a little bit about who we are. This is really exciting to say, since Mary has joined as executive director of the ACLU Virginia, we have seen some really great expansion when it comes to our teams. And so we have a new organizing team that is dedicated to working with community. And we also have a dedicated policy team. And so right now, we are 3 phenomenal individuals. I will say I am here and a lot of the work I do, I can't take credit for anything without my team. And so they will be talking later. I don't know, Shawn, if you want to give a quick wave to folks. He's our policy strategist. He's really great on the ground. And Bree, do you want to give a quick wave as well? Who is our legislative and policy counsel. And without all of us, I don't think we'd be able to be at the Capitol, being able to be lobbying, be in the community, driving throughout the Commonwealth to hold town halls with community partners and lobby legislators and really look at the data and what policies we need to recommend. And so we're looking to expand our team, both with the board support, with, leadership support, and with donors support. And so it's really exciting to see that we have expanded our policy team here at the ACLU of Virginia. So a little bit about the General Assembly. So there's 140 members total. The House of Delegates is 100 members and the Senate is 40. And so those are all the individuals that we work to convince during legislative session. If you go to the next slide, we'll see that the timeline, so on even years, it's a 60-day general timeline, and on odd years, it's a 45-day. And so, this is the only time where all legislators are generally at the Capitol for a continuous number of days. And so we see over 3,000 bills introduced. It's a very chaotic time. The system was not set up for folks to really be engaged. So please follow us on social media. Please follow us and we try to lift up like when a bill is being heard. Sometimes we don't know until the night before. So this upcoming legislative session starts on January 11th. Crossover will be around February 7th, and the session adjourns at February 25th. Don't think that the session is just over. What we've seen is that then the governor has 30 days to act on a bill. And so he can veto it, he can amend it and send it back to the legislature. There's, the budget will be, also being finalized during this time. And so there's really a lot of advocacy that goes on post legislative session as well. But this is really where we get to see all of these bills being introduced. We try to be in the committees, and we really, I will like to emphasize, we know that we can't be everywhere at once. And so we work alongside partners to make sure that legislators know which policies are an attack on civil liberties and which bills can help expand them. And so we're really working around the clock to make this happen. Very quickly, something I didn't mention, but I just remembered. You'll hear us talk a lot about constitutional amendments. Let me tell you one thing. It is very hard to change the Constitution in Virginia. And so the only way to do it is that it needs to pass 2 legislative sessions with an intervening election. So for example, you'd have to introduce a constitutional amendment next session, you'd have the fall elections, and then the following session, you would need to pass it again without changing anything on it, and only then does a piece of legislation get to the ballot. And so here, we've seen and tried, and we'll go into what constitutional amendments we are hoping to see come, but it is a very rigorous process. And I just want to note that because it's not easy here in Virginia. And so it's really, again, about building power, working within communities, and trying to convince most of the Commonwealth to talk to their legislators and let them know what are the important policies that we'd like to see to the ballot. All right, the 2023 legislative priorities. So we here at the Virginia ACLU affiliate like to tier our priorities. And what the tiers mean is that we recognize that we have a limited number of resources and a lot of different civil liberties to be fighting for. And to do so most effectively, we generally, our legislative agenda, we usually debrief what happened the previous session. We look towards and have conversations with our partners, both externally, internally, and think about the opportunities for the next upcoming legislative session, and then tier them in regards to what is going to be either proactively or defensively we know is going to take up a lot of our time and resources. So when we think about resources, we think about lobbying time, policy data and research. We think about the communications team, whom without we would not be able to have, share beautiful resources, let the public know what's going on, press releases, engage with media, submit op-eds. And then with our organizing team, think thoughtfully about lobby days, really what are stories of community members on the ground whose stories will really, make an impact to share why policies, certain changes are really important. And so it's really a variety of resources. We don't think of a legislative session as like a start and a stop. We're really thinking about long-term systemic change. And in order to get that, there's a lot of polling that goes into it, a lot of public education, a lot of community organizing, and a lot of lobbying. And so when we say tier one, it means that our organizational resources to these things are greater. And then our tier two and tier three may be things that our partners are leading on, things that we are supporting in certain ways, and tier three, other things that we are lifting up. This doesn't mean that this is, kind of changes throughout legislative session as the needs really change of the Commonwealth, given how far a bill goes, or if there's, an attack on civil liberties that was unprecedented and unexpected that we then raise up to tier one. And so just so that folks know, this is some of our terminology as a background of why certain things, what it means to be tier one. And so some of our tier one priorities are to support Second Look, end prison and jail profiteering. These two are proactive priorities that, Shawn will share a lot more about, but we've been working on proactively and to really work throughout the years to put those on and work across the aisle to pass something. Some of our defensive priorities is we want to stop abortion bans and anti-repro legislation, and we want to defeat all anti-LGBTQ bills. And so Bree will go into that about and share what we're really doing in that area of work. All right, so I am going to hand it over to Shawn, our phenomenal policy strategist.
Hey, thank you for the introduction, Ashna, and thanks for sort of setting the table on everything that we're working on. And I'm going to talk about a couple things now, but I'm going to start with Second Look, which is one of our tier one priorities. It's very important and it's personal for me as well. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Shawn Weneta. I'm a policy strategist here with the ACLU of Virginia. I've been with the organization since January 4th of this year, and looking forward to our second legislative session in my role. Prior to that, I worked with a group called the Humanization Project. However, prior to that, I spent 16 years incarcerated in the Virginia Department of Corrections at a 30-year sentence from Arlington Circuit Court, and I was pardoned by Governor Northam in 2020. So this work is personal to me, and Second Look would have been something that might have helped me, because one of the big problems in Virginia right now is, since parole was abolished and truth in sentencing was enacted back in the mid-90s, the only way for somebody to have a sentence reviewed is through executive intervention, and that means that the governor has to step in, and traditionally they've been very hesitant to do so. So what second look would allow somebody to do, somebody that's serving a protracted prison sentence of more than 15 years, they would be able to petition the circuit court in which they were sentenced to review their sentence. And basically what that would do is it would bring everybody into the courtroom in a very transparent process that would bring the prosecutor in the room, the victim in the room if they choose to participate, the judge, and the community, because it's going to be in the circuit court where the person was sentenced. And the court will have the opportunity to review everything that that person has done while they've been incarcerated for the last 15, 20, 25 years, and see if, on a variety of factors, determine if the person should have their sentence reviewed or should have their sentence amended. And hopefully that'll result in some people returning home that we don't need to continue to incarcerate. It really creates, as sort of the bullet point says there, it creates an accessible mechanism for fair and transparent sentence review. I was very fortunate to have the resources to be able to hire a good attorney and friendships that had relationships with legislators and social and political capital. And most people that are incarcerated don't have that opportunity. They don't have those resources. So this creates, again, an accessible and transparent mechanism to have a sentence reviewed. We've been working with and really been following the lead of really some wonderful grassroots partners in Sisters in Prison Reform. I see some of them are joining us tonight. The Humanization Project, Justice Forward Virginia, No Left Turns, and Sheba Williams were really at sort of the core of starting this movement in Virginia and really moving the ball forward. And we're really proud to be joining in those efforts. This is, as Ashna mentioned, this is a tier 1 priority. This is something we work very hard on. Our Senate patron is Senator Chap Peterson. We're very excited that he's going to be carrying the bill again this year. Last year, we were able to pass the bill through the Senate with bipartisan support, carrying about 20% of the Republican caucus in the Senate. That included Senator Suderline, Dunavance, Stanley, and Hanger. We hope to expand on that support in the Senate this year. Unfortunately, when it crossed over into the House, we were unable to get out of the committee process there. And it's the Courts of Justice Committee that's really sort of held us up last year, and we expect is going to be a difficult obstacle to overcome this year. That's where we're really focusing a lot of our efforts and a lot of our time and a lot of resources on trying to make sure we can get through the committee process in the House of Delegates this year. Lots of also non-traditional sort of allies that we're working with. One of our really sort of interesting allies in this is a Koch brothers PAC in a group called Americans for Prosperity. They've been really sort of working really hard with people across the aisle, particularly with Republican legislators that traditionally aren't sort of friendly to this sort of legislation, but are really starting to come around and seeing the value and the wisdom in this policy and how it should really move forward. So that's really sort of a quick breakdown of Second Look and where it sits. Again, it's personal to me, it's personal to others that are on this call, and we're really excited in how this is going to move forward in this session, and are really hopeful that we're going to pass this legislation this year and that the governor is going to sign it. So our next issue is, and this is something that again, I've been working on since even before I came to the ACLU, and the ACLU has been fantastic at supporting it. And we have a lot of really interesting allies in this as well. But this is prison and jail profiteering. So a lot of people sort of think of when you say prison and jail profiteering, a lot of people sort of their minds go to private prisons. And while that is something that we want to address, that's actually a very small percentage, single-digit percentage of sort of the money that is drawn and made within what we call the prison industrial complex. And a lot of the money, and a huge proportion of the money that sort of goes in and out of the prisons and in and out of the jails is through phone contracts and video visitation and deposit fees and commissions on commissaries. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the jails and the Department of Corrections and these different agencies are able to enter into profit sharing agreements with the vendors. There was a story just published in the Virginia Mercury today, as well as the Alexandria Connection. There's been a lot of press about this in recent months, and in Virginia certainly, and in the last year or two, where effectively sheriffs and prison officials are given kickbacks in their contracts, and they're sort of disguised under training or commissions or site commissions. But just for context, I'll throw a couple numbers out there. The Virginia Department of Corrections collects about $4.5 million a year in commissions, and that is a markup on the price of a good or service that is being paid for by predominantly the families of people who are incarcerated. So if it costs you $1 for a ramen noodle soup on the commissary, that price is artificially inflated to $1.10, and the Department of Corrections collects 10 cents, and they are able to sort of boost their coffers that way. To sort of give you a little bit more context, the jails, well, I said the Department of Corrections that incarcerates about 25,000 people at any given time through the year collect about $4.5 million a year. The sheriffs and regional jails collectively are drawing about $43 million in revenue a year, so a 10 multiple of what the prisons are collecting, and they incarcerate about the same amount of people. There's about 60,000 people incarcerated in Virginia right now as we speak. And those contracts are particularly egregious. They collect commissions. I've seen contracts as high as collecting commissions as high as 95%. We discovered a recent contract where a sheriff in Virginia has a Caribbean cruise for themselves and 7 of their staff that is included in their contract under the guise of training. It's a Caribbean cruise. There's been some press around that as well. We also discovered that sheriffs are collecting GPS, or that the vendors are collecting GPS and voice print data on people that are communicating, that are talking to people that are incarcerated, and then they are then selling that information and selling that data to law enforcement and to other purchasers. So there's just lots of things going on in this space, and what we're really hoping for is to shift these costs away from what are typically poor communities. These commissions really amount to a regressive tax on the most vulnerable people in the Commonwealth. And so we're hoping to get a no-cost communications and eliminate the commission structures for people that are incarcerated in our jails and prisons. We're particularly excited. We have been working, particularly the prisons, very hard, because that's sort of where people spend years and years and years, and it's a tremendous burden for a long period of time. And we're excited about the possibility of perhaps getting free communications for people that are incarcerated. And that would include email, that includes telephone communications, and that includes video visits, which were really sort of a lifeline during the pandemic when people weren't allowed to go into the prisons and visit in person. Communication with family and community are one of the greatest indicators of successful reentry upon release. And if we look at communications, and we sort of get pushback about wanting sort of to move this burden to the state and to the greater taxpayer body writ large. And if we really look at communication as a program, and that's the way we should really look at it, is as a program, and where are you getting the most bang for your buck? Again, this is one of the greatest indicators of successful reentry upon release. And we think that we should be paying for this and looking at this in the form of a rehabilitative program rather than some sort of a privilege. And once we start looking at it like that, then we can really sort of start to shift the business model and really make sure that that everybody is having access to this program, regardless of their ability to pay to access it or not. So I've talked a little bit about some of the things I'm working on, and I'm going to hand it over to Bree to talk about something that she is very passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shawn, for that really great overview of the proactive bills that you're working on this session. It's always nice to know that we get to do some proactive stuff. But hey, y'all, my name is Breanna Diaz. My pronouns are she and they. I'm policy and legislative counsel at ACLU Virginia. And like Shawn, I started on January 4th. So we've both been here for about 11 months. And I too will be entering my second session as an ACLU Virginia colleague. But I have been a long time LGBTQ, queer and trans rights advocate. I myself am a queer and trans person. And I bring my full lived experience to this work. And I'm grateful to be a part of a team that encompasses every aspect of our humanity as it informs our strategy, our goals, and the work that we do. So I get to talk about the not fun stuff that's going to be happening this session that we are going to be working on, though. And so first, I'm going to start with our tier 1 issue of stopping abortion bans and anti-reproductive freedom legislation we know we will see on this upcoming session. And so as Ashna touched in her introductory remarks, this summer we saw the overturn of Roe v. Wade, which, which mandated a fundamental right to abortion at the federal level. Virginia does have abortion is legal in Virginia. However, we do not have a fundamental right to abortion, contraception, and other aspects of reproductive health care. We do not have that right codified in state law, nor in our Constitution. And so that leaves us in a very uncomfortable position of knowing that abortion access can be taken away from us in just one session. And we know that anti-abortion legislators are using that opportunity of living in a post-Dobbs world to enact or to roll back and even ban abortion access in the Commonwealth. And they have already pre-filed a bill, which I'm going to unpack. So what can we expect or anticipate this session? We can and should expect abortion bans in the form of life at conception bans, such as what we have already seen introduced by Delegate Marie March, as well as a 15-week abortion ban that has been mandated or asked for by the Youngkin administration. And so I'm going to unpack both of those, what our plan is and how we're working in partnership with many phenomenal partners to ensure that these bills do not become law. So first, the life at conception ban. It is exactly what the title is. This bill would seek to ban abortion in the Commonwealth, but also is written in such a terrible way that it could extend to other forms of contraception and IVF. So it is a broad, sweeping bill that has serious implications for reproductive health care in the Commonwealth. While that sounds alarming, as it should be, that such a bill was ever introduced, we feel confident that we will be able to defeat this bill. While it might be able to make it out of the House of Delegates, which is unfortunately an anti-abortion majority, we feel confident that we will be able to stop it in the Senate, as this bill will likely go through the Senate Education and Health Committee, which is stacked with pro-reproductive freedom and abortion rights champions. Even though we feel confident in defeating this bill in the Senate, we still think it's important to ignite our base and to do public education to make folks aware that these bills are being introduced right here in Virginia. They have been introduced in previous sessions, and we should expect to see them introduced in the future. And so I think it's important that we activate our members, our supporters, and allies to make their voices heard during the session, whether that's attending one of these committee hearings in the House or the Senate to oppose these abortion bans, while it's having conversations with your community about the negative impact such a ban would have in Virginia should it pass. We're also working in close partnership with our reproductive rights and justice partners like Planned Parenthood Advocates of Virginia and many of the abortion funds in Virginia to do that public education work and to unite folks to participate in actions during session and other planned events. We're also working closely with legislators to provide them with resources and talking points to combat these abortion bans when they come across their desks. So please know that the ACLU Virginia is a leader in this space and is doing what we can to ensure these bills die a quick death. I also failed to address the 15-week ban. So real quickly, that is one that is definitely something of concern. As I said, Youngkin has made a campaign promise and made it a priority to have this bill introduced this session. It will be introduced by 4 members, 2 in the House, 2 in the Senate. But again, we fully anticipate that this bill will fail in the Senate Education and Health Committee. But we are doing the work to talk with legislators that sit on that committee to ensure that they will vote against the 15-week abortion ban once it hits their committee, and to continue conversations with members about the negative impact this would have on all folks, but in particular marginalized members of the community. That's Black and Brown folks, low-income folks, folks in rural communities, queer and trans folks, should abortion be limited in any way. So again, please be aware of these bills. Please know we are doing what we can to defeat them, and know that we hope to do so. Next slide. Again, I'm on the stopping the bad stuff train. We should also expect to see anti-LGBTQ bills. We are aware of 3 that have already been pre-filed. And so what we know so far is that anti-LGBTQ legislators are continuing to introduce bills banning trans youth, whether it's playing sports, whether it's attempts to roll back their rights in schools or in the education environment, or even banning access to gender affirming care. I'm sure you all have heard that we are in a record-breaking year after year of states introducing anti-LGBTQ, but specifically anti-trans bills. And unfortunately, Virginia is not immune from that trend. We saw these same very similar bills, such as the anti-trans or the trans sports ban was introduced last session by Senator Kiggins, but was swiftly defeated in the Senate Education and Health Committee. Even though it was issued a pretty interesting death, we still have members that are seeking to reintroduce it this session. And so we have 2 sports bans that have been introduced or pre-filed thus far, and both seek to do what Kiggins' bill did and prohibit transgender youth, in particular trans women, from participating in sports consistent with their identity in elementary schools and high schools, as well as at the collegiate level. Again, these bills are rooted in transphobia and myth about participation in sports by trans folks. And we are lucky to have members in the Senate Education and Health Committee who understand where these bills are coming from, who knows the negative impact such laws would have on an already vulnerable and at-risk population. And like 2022's trans sports ban, we feel confident that should these bills be introduced in the House and make their way out of the House, that we will defeat them in the Senate. Another bill that we have already seen is the gender affirming care ban bill that has been introduced by Senator Chase. It is a near mirror bill to what we saw introduced and enacted in Arkansas that is currently being litigated in the 8th Circuit as has got a lot of issues, but the impact is no joke. You know, it would prohibit trans youth from accessing gender affirming healthcare, even with their parents' consent. It even extends as far as to adults, in that it would roll back our state law mandating that healthcare providers or health insurance must cover the cost of gender affirming care for adults. This bill would render that requirement to an optional law. And so that's terrifying, because that's not only targeting minors, it's targeting adults who need this care to be their authentic selves and to live full lives. So like what we're doing with the anti-abortion bills, please know that we are trying to activate our base to make them aware of these bills, to participate in lobby days we have planned with our partners to make legislators aware of these terrible bills and why they should oppose them. And we're really excited to be working with so many great partners, such as Equality Virginia, Side by Side Virginia, and He, She, Ze, and We, to ensure that these bills are defeated next session. Next. I think, Shawn, you start this one.
I think this is me. Yeah. So a couple other things that we are working on that we're particularly excited about, that we're co-leading and supporting on the criminal legal reform side. And I'll just hit on 2 of those quickly. That is DOC oversight and transparency in the parole process. The Virginia Department of Corrections, they have a $1.5 billion budget. They incarcerate about 25,000 people a year. They employ about 11,000 people, and they have 0 oversight. We don't think that is that's a good idea. There is a potato seed oversight board in Virginia. We believe that there should be oversight of the Department of Corrections as well, and we believe that it should be independent. So we are moving forward with legislation that will do just that and provide some independent oversight that will protect both people that are incarcerated as well as staff. And parole transparency. You've probably heard a lot about this during the election last year, and the parole process is not transparent. And advocates have been screaming that for a generation, and now it seems like that there is consensus about the parole process needing to be reformed. This is not an expansion of eligibility. This is simply making the process more fair, transparent, and that the people that are making these decisions are accountable not only to the public, but also to the people that are eligible for parole and that they're getting a fair hearing as well. So those are just a couple of the criminal legal reform issues that we are also supporting that are sort of tier 2 that Ashna sort of mentioned, and I know Bree has a couple that we're working on as well.
Yeah, very quickly, other constitutional amendments that we are aware of that we'll see this session is first, we know that Senator Eben and Delegate Sickles will be reintroducing their resolution to repeal the ban on same-sex marriage in our Constitution. This effort will look a little different than what we saw in previous sessions, as it will be just a simple repeal of the current ban. It will not be an amendment expanding or recognizing a fundamental right to marriage. Second, the right to reproductive health or freedom. We are aware of our partners are working on a constitutional amendment recognizing a fundamental right to reproductive freedom, or amending our current Equal Rights Amendment in the state constitution so that abortion access or abortion is protected in Virginia, regardless of the makeup of the General Assembly. Like Ashna said, this is a long, tricky, complicated process. But please know that while these resolutions may not see the light of day this session, that they are just the start of a growing effort to recognize folks' rights in our Constitution.
All right, so I will start with the right row of some of the bad bills that we're blocking. I also just want to take a moment to recognize and just give a shout out to, Bree and Shawn and our community partners who on the ground have been working day and night. And all of these reforms that we're talking about, when we say we're trying to switch, and influence legislators, and when we talk about the community members who have the lived experiences that are the experts at these issues, working to really drive this work is I just feel really privileged to be in this space. And so I just want to recognize that and share that admiration of the partners that we work with on the ground, and the team that, I'm very lucky to have. So we are going to see really bad bills come in all of these different areas. And so we are going to see voting rights. So I know last session we saw a lot of absentee voting rollbacks, bills that would eliminate drop-off locations for return of absentee ballots, bills that were restricting, that would limit when absentee voting could take place. And, and then we saw some really bad photo ID requirement laws, that would have restricted access to the ballot box by establishing photo ID requirements. And so the Senate Privilege and Elections Committee has been really vital to blocking these bad bills. And so our next upcoming legislative session, we are going to do the work on the ground with our partners to really make sure that folks are educated, and that, there aren't laws and policies that are passed that would roll back access to the ballot box. One particular constitutional amendment I just want to highlight is that, I just want to mention Virginia is still one of 2 states that permanently takes away the right to vote from people with felony convictions, including those who have already served their time. And so right now, there's only one way to gain your right to vote back, and that's through the governor signing, someone's individual right to vote back. And, this is power that both Republican and Democratic governors have used to restore the right to thousands of returning citizens, but it's cumbersome, it's inconsistent. And I also want to note that it is, racially unjust the way that the system is set up. While 1 in 20 non-Black Virginians are disenfranchised, 1 in 7 Black Virginians are, largely because Black people are over-policed, subjected to harsher sentences, and felonized at a higher rate. And so this upcoming legislative session, we will see this right to vote amendment be proposed through Senator Locke and Senator Lucas. And we would like to see everyone who is 18 years and older and a citizen eligible to vote to receive their right to vote back. And so that's something that we're looking forward to. In the First Amendment space, we're going to see a lot of, like last session, we saw classroom censorship, banning the teaching of divisive concepts, this broad language that would basically restrict teachers' ability to teach about slavery, racism, LGBTQ issues, because those are deemed to be divisive concepts. And so we're going to be working on the ground to make sure none of those types of bills get across. In the privacy realm, unfortunately, we saw some really bad policy pass this past legislative session. So we'll do our best to really correct it. Right now, the bill that did pass allowed Virginia State Police and local law enforcement agencies and campus police to use facial recognition technology for criminal investigations without a warrant or oversight. And so again, all of these issue areas that we work on, immigration, privacy, voting rights, First Amendment, we have seen terrible bills be presented in the past. Some have passed, some haven't. And we're going to try our best this upcoming legislative session to block these bad bills. We do not want to go backwards. Anything that's an attack on civil liberties should be seen as an attack on the Commonwealth. And so we're going to work together with partners and legislators to really continue to educate the public and block some of these bills. Shawn and Bree, do you want to touch upon any of the, expand upon any of the bad bills that we might see in the CJ or the repro or the LGBTQ and trans space?
Sure. Well, we don't know these things for sure. I think we should anticipate to see for the repro space, bills seeking to roll back RIPA, or the Reproductive Health Protection Act, which expanded access to abortion here in Virginia by repealing outdated TRAP laws like ultrasound requirements, a waiting period, and written informed consent, which is a duplicative process before you get any sort of procedure, and was trying to target and coerce folks seeking abortions to dissuade them from getting that abortion. So those type of TRAP regulations that we successfully repealed in 2020, I think we should anticipate seeing bills trying to roll back all those advances we made in reproductive health care. As we saw them introduced in the last session, we should anticipate them again. For LGBTQ and trans rights, we are watching out for any efforts to introduce a quote unquote parental rights bill, which is really just another way of trying to target LGBTQ young people in healthcare, in education, in their very communities, trying to prevent them from living their full authentic lives. And we've already seen several states introduce or enact similar legislation, and we've already seen the horrible impact it has had on trans youth and their families. So again, we will be watching for those bills should they be introduced, and we'll swiftly take action to defeat them.
And just quickly, and I'll hit on privacy and criminal legal just very quickly. Criminal legal reform, we expect to see a codified repeal of the earned sentence credit repeal that was included in the most recent budget session. Those of you that sort of follow us and follow this space might remember that in the budget session, the governor put a budget amendment in that sort of undid a small part of our earned sentence credit expansion that passed 2 years ago. Because it was in the budget, that will expire in 2 years as the budget does. So there'll be efforts to actually codify that. So in order for it to not expire, they actually have to put it into the code. So I expect that we'll see that this year. We know that there's going to be efforts to repeal the ban on pretextual stops and things like, just that are just inherently racist. We know the data proves that. However, the law enforcement is working really hard to try and undo those protections that we put in place a couple of years ago. And I'll hit on privacy quickly as well. I mentioned earlier about how the sheriffs and the regional jails are reselling voice, print, and GPS data of end users of phone calls. We should need to be vigilant on that. I'm hoping to actually that there's actually going to be a bill that's going to move forward that is going to prevent that. There's actually a Republican delegate who's particularly interested in ending that practice. So that falls right into the privacy bucket. We're also going to be very vigilant to make sure that there's not an expansion of the facial recognition technology bill that passed this last session. We didn't like it as it was. We'd like to roll it back if at all possible, but it would not surprise us to see some attempt to expand facial recognition technology use in this coming session. So we're going to be vigilant on that as well.
Great. So I'm going to take over here. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Hart. I'm the communications associate, and I'm going to be running our Q&A session tonight. And so it looks like we've already got some questions in the chat. That is great. Just a reminder, drop a question in the chat that you want answered. Go ahead and raise your hand. You can do that by hovering over the bottom of your screen. A little bar will come up, hit reactions, and you should be able to raise your hand virtually as well if you want to ask a question in real time and use your voice here. So the first question, I think this is one for Shawn, and it's just, will Delegate Hope again patron the DOC Independent Ombudsman bill?
So great question, and then we've gotten to be very familiar with Delegate Patrick Hope from Arlington carrying this bill and really sort of wanting to shine a bright spotlight on the Department of Corrections and seeking transparency in their practices. So we will have it going through both chambers this session. So something that hasn't happened in the past. The Senator Dave Marsden from, I believe he's in Fairfax, Fairfax East, a little bit towards Springfield. He'll be carrying a Senate version of Delegate Hope's bill. Delegate Hope will at least be a chief co-patron of the oversight bill. We tomorrow, hopefully we're going to hammer down we have a targeted Republican patron who we believe and are very hopeful will carry the bill. It's sort of a key legislator that would really sort of really be a good signal that we're going to get the bill passed if they are in fact to carry the bill. So love Delegate Hope. I'd really like for this other person to carry the bill because it gives the bill a better chance. And for the record, Delegate Hope is also hopeful that this other person will carry the bill because he wants to see it passed. He's not worried about getting credit for it.
Awesome. Thank you, Shawn. Just another question that we got earlier. I think it was when we were talking about second look. This is from Denise, and it's, do you think the strategy this year should focus on getting bills out of the subcommittees as well? And anybody can respond to that.
I'll just go quick on second look, but this of course impacts a lot of other things that we're working on, and good to see you, Denise. So yes, the very simple answer is yes, particularly for second look. We are pretty confident in our ability to report it out of the Senate again, hopefully again expanding our support. So yes, we are focused very hard on getting this bill out of the what we call the CRIM subcommittee of the House Courts of Justice committee. If we can get it out of the CRIM subcommittee, then we are pretty confident moving forward. If we get out of CRIM sub, you should have the votes to get out of full committee, and we are confident that we have the vote count that we need on the floor of the House. So it's really just a matter of getting out of those committees. Thanks for the question, Denise. Good to see you.
Awesome. Thanks, Shawn. This next question I'm going to pose to Ashna. I think that you would be a great person to answer this. And it's just, what are lobby days? We had mentioned them earlier. What are they? What is the purpose? What do they look like?
This is a great question. So I want to say that each organization and each community organization kind of does lobby days differently, but the goal of it is that we get folks, community members, most directly impacted by the legislation, to come to the Capitol on one specific day and talk to their legislators. So this could be as small as, getting a group of like 5 or 10 folks from a specific community to talk to their legislator and other legislators on the bill, or it could be known as, some of our partners like New Virginia Majority or the McShin Foundation, who bring hundreds of folks, up to the Capitol to talk to their legislators. And so really it's an opportunity to connect community with legislators. I know it can feel really, I know when I enter the space, it can feel daunting to think, this is the Capitol, there are legislators, but remember, they represent you. And so your voice, your story, your experiences are so very important. And lobby days are just one way to really connect those voices and those community members with the legislators who serve us.
Ashna, what are some other ways to kind of use your voice during legislative session?
That's a great question, Sam. So, here at the ACLU, I'll start off with, you might feel like you get a lot of emails from us, but those action alerts are really helpful. All you have to do is look at the action alert, and then it sends it, you click send, you can change the message a little bit, and that message then gets emailed to your legislator. I will also say that a lot of folks don't call their legislators. And so if you really just, call your legislator. You can look up their phone number on LIS. We can put that information in the chat, and other resources. And so they tally it because there's so very few calls that they receive that literally folks are tallying, okay, we got 5 calls today. So, and that makes a big difference. And they say, wow, constituents really care about this policy. So calling your legislator, sending the action alert, use social media, tweet, Facebook, Instagram at your legislators. They look. Sometimes, you know, we'll do live tweet events while a bill is being heard or while something is on the floor. And legislators are there looking at their social media and seeing what the public is saying. The other thing, you know, I would say 2 more things. One is to get your story out there. So our communications team, Sam and others have been phenomenal. If you have a story to share and you would like to write a blog about it, or you'd like to share it locally in a letter to the editor op-ed, then you can really work with us, and we're willing to work with folks to really place those stories and lift up those stories that are so very important in the voices of the community. And so that's another way to really do it. And then, yeah, you know, there's a lot of different ways. Those are some that come to mind now, but really, you know, connecting with folks, let them know legislative session is here. I know it goes by so fast, but really it's, again, legislators represent Virginians. And so really it's about just using your voice and recognizing that it's them serving you and not the other way around.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashna. We've got a really great question in the chat, which is that I'm curious about effective strategies to engage families in Southwest Virginia on public education issues. Youngkin has been effective about weaponizing this issue, so I feel like strong talking points to counter are needed. Can we talk about kind of public education and what our concerns are? And anybody want to kind of speak on that?
Yeah, I'm actually going to highlight something that Bree is co-partnering on with folks for a town hall. Bree, do you want to talk a little bit about the virtual town hall next week and how, you know, really partners in engaging in Southwest Virginia? I know you've had some great, and partners have done some great work in that region that we can really learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I could speak to, we are pulling together an LGBTQ rights virtual town hall. And this, that we will be hosting on Wednesday, December 14th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. An RSVP for this event will be going live tomorrow. And we'll be joined by Senator Evan, Hashmi, Delegate Sickles, and Delegate Rome. And while I know those individuals don't represent the Southwest corner or the Southwest region, nor is this event no longer specific to the Southwest region, it did stem from community conversations with Southwestern LGBTQ rights advocates and community members. As we know, we are there. We know that there are attacks against our community happening at the local and state level. And we know that we are deeply rooted in self-organizing against efforts to roll back our rights and are ready to take action during session. And so we're hoping this town hall can be one of many that we will host in the future, uplifting LGBTQ rights and issues we'll see in the General Assembly. And we will definitely be looking at a region-specific conference or LGBTQ rights summit with our partners, Equality Virginia, after session to continue that organizing, education, and partnership with Southwest members.
I will also say that, Shawn, do you want to talk a little bit about your work in Southwest Virginia? I know you were just like around the area doing some lobbying meetings, but really the community work and kind of connecting with local churches and community members and some of our other priorities as well.
Sure. So I was just in Roanoke yesterday, taking meetings with legislators out there to talk about our priorities. We were really working really hard, particularly on the parole reform that we spoke about, as well as oversight for the Department of Corrections. And it's really sort of been interesting in that area. Legislators out there they're very accessible, and it's sort of interesting when you get to some of the more populated areas, legislators are a little bit more difficult to sort of maybe get a meeting with. But in these more rural areas, they're incredibly accessible, and they have pretty good constituent services for the most part. So I think Ashna might have hit on it of the point of calling your legislator and asking for meetings. You know, we elected these people, and these people are not sort of the people in the Senate up in Capitol Hill in Washington, where they're sort of hard to get to and maybe have some celebrity sort of status. These are people that are selling cars and selling insurance, or attorneys, and they will take these meetings with you. And if you really let them know that you are impacted by these issues, they listen. When you go in and you take a meeting with them and tell them your story, they pay attention to that. It's one thing for Bree or I or Ashna or a lobbyist to go into a meeting with one of these legislators and sort of say, hey, this issue is important and here's why. And we could even tell our own stories. Bree and I are directly impacted by the issues that we work on, but it's much more powerful when a constituent, when one of their voters goes into their office and says, you need to listen to me, this is my story and this is important, this impacts me, this impacts my family, this impacts somebody that I care about, or this impacts my community that I care about, this impacts my fellow students, this impacts the people the kids that I teach, the people that I go to church with. That matters to these legislators. So I would encourage people to do that, particularly people that if you may be joining us from sort of, I would say, west of Charlottesville, and particularly west of Charlottesville and south of Stanton. If these issues are important to you, these are the legislators particularly that need to hear from you. It's one thing, again, for the ACLU to call them and to send them emails and to send them letters and to take meetings with them. It's a different thing if a voter, private citizen, goes and takes a meeting with them and lets them know what's important to them. That's when they pay attention.
Thank you. And yeah, the only last thing that I will add is that we are going to do, I keep going back to public education because I want to just recognize and acknowledge that there is weaponizing of issues and misinformation that's being spread a lot of times. And so one thing the ACLU will be doing this session a lot and have in the past is really, doing Mythbusters and really, again, continuing to educate the public about what these policies are, what the impact is, right? It can sometimes look pretty, when first read or first introduced, but really unpacking what the impact of a certain policy will be. And so that's very important. And so always feel free to also go to our website. I know our communications team and policy team works hand in hand really strongly together to try to really root it in both data and community.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I'm going to wrap up our Q&A section for now. But just so you all know, all of you have my email. You can also always email ACLU-VA at ACLU-VA.org. If you have any more questions, we are always available to answer any questions that you may have. And we're happy to hook you up with whoever has the answer to that question. So always feel free to reach out to us. As the comms person, I do have to plug, just as Ashna was saying, if you do want to keep in touch with us, signing up for our emails, you can do that on our website. Taking our action alerts on our website and following us on social media are the best ways to do that. So log on to ACLUVA.org and you can sign up for emails, take action alerts, read blog posts about what we're doing, and just really dig deep. We've also recently released a very exciting storytelling page about the second look bill that features real impacted Virginians who would be impacted by second look or have been impacted by second chances. And it's a really powerful page. So I really encourage you to take a look at that and to follow us on social media, sign up for our emails, and once again, reach out with any questions that you all might have. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it over to Ashna to wrap us up.
All right. I think this picture is really reflective. We are not alone in this work. And so I just want to thank you all for attending this event, for your great questions, and most importantly, for your continued support of our work. Our incredible staff, our supporters and members, and all the organizations and communities we work with hand in hand make this critical work possible. And we are grateful to stand with you as we move forward. As you've heard tonight, this upcoming General Assembly session is going to be difficult and full of challenges, but we're ready for all of it. And I can't thank you all enough for helping us fuel the work ahead so we are ready for what the 2023 year legislative session and elections will bring. If you want to make sure you're receiving updates during session and about our work, please sign up for our action alerts and newsletters and follow us on social media like Sam mentioned. You can also become a member or renew your membership at any time or make an end of year gift as you consider your philanthropy during this time of year. As always, we're grateful for all the ways you support our work and have a wonderful night. Thank you.